Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Briar.
It's so beautiful. Paul is just sharing his one of his many talents. Is it Tibetan bowl? Yeah,
Yes,
beautiful. So excited to have you on, Paul. I'm so grateful. Thank you for spending your time with us.
it is my absolute pleasure and honor. Thank you.
We have beautiful Paul on. He is a yoga and meditation teacher, and Paul and I met actually. I think it was like maybe 6 months ago on a broad striker for desires training. He was facilitating with one of our dear friends, Tanya, and I loved the way you were holding that masculine presence, and it was such a beautiful space. And I think these teachings have really changed my life, and I know yours too. So I really wanted to get you on to share a little bit about your journey into your dharma and how that unfolds, and also just kind of a little bit of life chats about the things that you love and the lessons that you've learned along the way, and to really inspire the people that are listening that are seeking this knowledge and seeking this wisdom from people that are really embodying it. So I really appreciate that. So thank you.
It is, again, it's just such an honor and a joy to be here, especially since my dear friend Tanya was just on the podcast not too long ago as well. So the fact that I'm able to share the same stage with the same platform with her is just very, very cool. So thank you for having me.
My pleasure. So today we're going to speak a little bit about the yoga tradition, and really kind of how it has helped you in your life and your lessons, and how it's inspired you to evolve and move beyond your limitations, which I think so many of us right now are experiencing a little bit of challenge or discomfort in that fear of the unknown. So I would love to share kind of like your journey into this path, and obviously it's not your only path. You have multiple different offerings that you connect with. So maybe you can share a little bit about your journey into what you're doing now, and really kind of like the definition of dharma, because a lot of people think it's just like a job or a role. And one of my teachers, Michael, says it's like, what is my role in the conscious evolution of life? And it's like this piece of like your dharma or your purpose is always evolving as you evolve. So it's hard to say it's one specific thing. And maybe you can start at the beginning, like kind of how you progressed on your own, I guess, journey of seeking knowledge, and you call it spiritual path, or how has that unfolded? And I know you came from like quite a different background, so maybe you can share with the listeners as well.
I would love to. Sure. Thank you for asking. And I love the definition of Dharma that your coach, was it your coach that you said
Yeah, yeah,
gave? Another definition it comes from one of my favorite authors, Eckhart Tolle, which we'll discuss as well.
yeah.
And he simply defines Dharma as the alignment of your inner and outer purpose. So we all have an inner purpose, which is a path of spiritual growth or spiritual expansion. And then our outer purpose is, how does that show up in this lifetime, in this incarnation, with this body, with these tools, with this set of circumstances that we're born into? So how do we align the two? I love that, the alignment of our inner purpose of spiritual awakening and our outer purpose of bringing that physically into the world.
Mm.
So my current place in life has two main facets: teaching yoga and meditation, and then I'm also a real estate agent here in Las Vegas. So I've been a real estate agent for 17 years, and that's provided me my means for artha. So my main source of income.
Yeah,
However, my soul is paid by teaching yoga and meditation. So
love that.
real, real estate pays the bills, yoga pays the soul. And I actually came to my spiritual path in 2006. It was through the vehicle of real estate. I was actually helping my cousin purchase a home, and she had been studying Buddhism and meditation for 40 years. And I was asking questions to her about, what is meditation? What do you actually do? I was curious. I had never really explored it before, but I'd heard the word, and I've always had an inquisitive mind. And growing up Christian, my household was very Christian, Eastern Orthodox, as a matter of fact, which is very traditional. Um, I wasn't exposed to other avenues of spiritual development, but I had heard of meditation. And so when you help someone purchase a house, you're spending quite a bit of time with them and sharing some intimate details of your life with each other. And so she told me that she meditates daily. And so I was asking, tell me more about that. And she explained that she wasn't the best person to teach me, but she knows someone who is. And so that's where I met a man named Terry Hunt. And he and I to this day are the best of spiritual friends. And when she introduced me to him, he was leading classes in his home here in Las Vegas through an organization called the Theosophical Society. And theosophy, if I could encapsulate it into one or two sentences, which is very hard to do, it's the comparative study of science, religion, and philosophy
Mm.
to come up with answers for life and what the heck this is all for. Why are we here? What are we doing here? Is there a goal? Is there a plan, a purpose? So when I met Terry, I just devoured what he was offering. He was talking about what happens in the brain when we meditate, what happens with the emotions when we meditate. What's
Mm.
the definition of meditation? Is there a goal to it? Is there a process? What does reincarnation mean? What does karma mean? These are kind of pop culture words that I had heard of. And a lot of yoga students hear of these things, but not a lot of us have a solid foundation. So I've seen in my experience, not a lot of yoga practitioners have a solid foundation of these things. And when you hear the word God, for example, that's a big word. It almost has a different connotation to every person who says it or hears it.
Mm.
Well, in theosophy, and one of my goals on my spiritual path is to define these things and to be specific about what do these different aspects of spirituality mean to us and how can we use them to further our own path. So Terry and I became very close, and I was one of his most regular students. And I told him that I wanted to teach like him because he explained these spiritual concepts in such a way that made sense to me. I wanted the ability to speak these things to people who have heard of spiritual things, but don't have, a solid understanding of them. So
Mm.
we began to teach together in 2009. And what we were teaching was not yoga per se, but it was 100% yoga in its nature. What we began to teach together was a class on Eckhart Tolle's book, A New Earth. And that's one of the
Yay.
things I was hoping to be able to discuss tonight. And here we
Please.
go.
Yes, I love that book.
So, A
So
New Earth, this book changed my entire life and catapulted me into this new dimension of spiritual expansion. Terry had not heard of this, even though he'd been studying spirituality for, at that point, almost 50 years. He had not heard of Eckhart Tolle. And when I introduced this book to him, what we both realized is this is a modern day statement of Patanjali's Yoga Sutras to us. That's what this means to us. And what this book's main goal is to us is to see the world clearly. Viveka Shakti, see the world without the coloring of our ego, without the colorings and the biases and the needs and wants of our egoic desires. And then we can see from our higher self and then see clearly in order to live our dharma, in order to allow our inner purpose to unfold in the material world. So we taught a class on this, and we used Oprah Winfrey's course guide as our guide. So some of your listeners, Briar, might have actually been aware when this book came out. Oprah, gobbled it up as well. She brought this book into her book club, and she ended up doing a 10-week webinar with Eckhart Tolle. I believe it was in 2008, might have been 2009, something like that. So it was a 10-week webcast. She and he facilitated it, and they had people from all over the world call in and ask questions and discuss. It took them 10 weeks. Well, when Terry and I did our version of this, it took us 10 months because we were a lot slower, and we tried to incorporate yoga philosophy, theosophical teachings. And our class, we felt, was very valuable because we combined several different avenues for spiritual development into our class. And then after that was concluded 10 months later, we thought we should write a book on this because we think we came up with something that hasn't been done before to us. This is our own synthesis of various avenues for spiritual development that we wanted to put together in something that we thought was fresh and new and easily digestible to our target audience, who what I've said several times already, people who have heard of spirituality but don't really have a solid grasp on it and who want more. So we've decided to write a book. Fast forward a couple years to 2013. That's when I discovered physical yoga. Physical
You're
yoga
backwards.
came right. Isn't that most people find the asana, the very physically stimulating asana classes first, and then realize, wow, there's something spiritual to the physical practice. I
Mm,
found it the other way around. So I took a yoga teacher training in 2013 and realized, okay, now here's the other half of the spiritual stuff that I've been studying.
mm,
Here's the physical stuff, right? Here's the energetic piece, the actual the tantric piece, if you will. How do we move energy through our body? How do we manipulate our own being to be a powerful force in the world, coupling that with the mental practices that we've already been studying? And the rest is history. I started teaching my own yoga classes and incorporating both. And I like to call it the yin and yang of yoga, the mental aspect, which is all of the meditation and the spiritual growth and the theory, of course. And then there's the physical aspect, which is teaching yoga classes to the masses and, maybe hooking people a little bit that way, and then
mm.
peppering in some of the
Wisdom.
spiritual things that people didn't know they wanted until they get a taste of it.
Mm. And can you speak to, I love that because you weave that in so well. Can you speak to maybe Eckhart Tolle's book, A New Earth? Because I mean, I've read it 3 times and I feel like every single like, time I read it, it's changing because I feel like I can peel back another layer of my own ego to realize, okay, that's why I've been limited, or that's where I've been, yeah, in my own shadow, I guess, not really seeing certain qualities of myself. And I think through reading the book, it definitely opens up. Is that like that for you? Obviously, you've probably read it many times. Do you feel like each time you read it, you get deeper understanding of it?
Oh yes, of course, Briar. I've read it so many times that I had it bound in a different way because it was already falling apart. And so I actually took it to a place and had them do this spiral binding thing and put
Nice.
a plastic cover on it because it was falling apart. And I had so many notes written in it and so many things underlined. So the simple answer is yes. It does reveal more and more, gold and gems each time I read it. And there are a few key pieces that I keep coming back to, but it's about recognizing when the ego is operating versus our higher self operating.
Mm,
And when we recognize that, we can catch it. And eventually we'll be able to catch it before it even happens. Then our responses or reactions to things in life won't be reactions at all. They'll
yeah.
be conscious actions, and we won't be controlled by circumstances around us. We will be the Zen master who's in control of our surroundings, and we'll never be annoyed. We'll never be frustrated. Well, of course, that's theory for most human beings. That's theory, and that's far in the future. But why not aim for that? How awesome would it be to never be annoyed by anything, to never get frustrated? That would be kind of cool, right?
Please, I mean, I don't know if you can relate. Maybe you have a specific, you can think, well, I just quickly share this because I think it's quite powerful, of a story or a recent event where your ego, you've observed this part of this ego wanting to prove yourself or wanting to be special. Like I had one the other day, whereas I had a friend of mine, we were just speaking about it before, saying, do we mix like business and friendship? And I had a friend reach out to me saying she wanted to help with some Ayurvedic stuff, and I won't go into full details, but I was like, yeah, this is the price and like this is the process, and she kind of was a little bit yeah, she thought that I would give her kind of a discount on on it, and I definitely said to her, look, if we we can work something out that works for us both, but I have to value my time and energy, and this is my work. And she kind of got a little bit triggered by that, thinking that she would get a little bit of a better deal. And I was so yeah, I was so triggered. I saw my ego come out, like wanting to send a voice message back, like to kind of like justify why I charge the way I am, and like the kind of like the in depth of like all the knowledge that I have and why it's so valuable. And I caught myself in that ego trap, and then at the end, and I was like, actually, I'm just gonna surrender to that. But it took me like at least a day to really process that and realize how it was my ego needing to prove myself and prove to others that I'm worthy. And I know so many people probably can relate because we have that like inner child that's like, I'm good enough. I don't know if you can relate to that, or you have a
Oh,
story or something to share on.
I I have many stories. And thank you for sharing that as well. And
Mm,
when we share these things, it makes it almost okay for others to just say, wow, it's not just me who goes through that. And even yoga teachers, we're just people too. We're all
mm,
on our own path. But let me just say that anyone, if any of your listeners, Briar, are real estate agents, we have to practice what Terry and I call the three nons all the time. So the three nons, and we get it from Eckhart Tolle. He doesn't say it that way, but the three nons. Now, we think these are the biggest keys to spiritual, to the biggest keys to spiritual growth: non-judgment, non-reaction,
Mm,
and the biggie, non-attachment.
yeah.
Non-judgment, non-reaction, non-attachment. So in real estate, and I just had a gigantic lesson presented to me, and I didn't learn it immediately because my ego didn't want to learn it, but then I had to practice my non-judgment, non-reaction, non-attachment.
Mm,
It was with a very good client of mine who's purchased and sold several houses with me over the years, and they've come back to me for another real estate transaction, and this was going to be the largest transaction of my 17-year career, the largest dollar amount transaction. And it's challenging for all humans, I think. Very few humans are not affected by money. Very few can say money doesn't, I don't care about money, and be honest about that.
mm,
Money is important, right? Artha is important. Being able to provide for ourselves and our families it's important. So money does have power over us, the
yeah.
degree to which we allow based on our ego, usually.
Mm,
So I ended up losing the deal.
yeah.
And it wasn't because of anything that I necessarily did wrong. It's just the way the universe works. And it's hard to see that kind of potential successful transaction come to a close and the income that would result not happen. And being able to stand there and say, wow, this is the right choice for the client, for my friends who are my clients,
Yeah.
and for me. And I can't even begin to understand all the energy patterns that go into the decision of the clients to go a different direction, to buy a different house, not the house that we were working on together, to buy a different property,
Mm,
which the one which I'm not involved in. It doesn't mean I'm any less of a soul, of a spiritual person. It doesn't mean I'm a less of anything. It just means that the universe has a path, a flow, a plan: non-judgment, non-attachment, non-reaction, which saves me suffering. If I am attached, if I judge, and if I react, I suffer. And that's a reminder for me. That's a reminder for me and for everyone. And it can be something as small as, missing an exit on the freeway. Are you going to get, how mad are you willing to get? How much suffering are you willing to allow yourself to experience?
mm.
Or can you just chuckle about it and, be a few minutes later to your destination and take the next exit instead of, getting frustrated and furious and road rage?
So insightful. I love hearing people's examples because I think people can really relate. Because I realized like how much I suffered for that short period. Of course, maybe in previous years it would have been a lot longer than a day. But how much we are creating our own samskaras, our stories, like in the mind, and maybe that plays into a little bit about the karma piece. Like, what are our lessons here? Rod says like, what are the lessons that you're resisting learning? Because I think the tradition says we have like three big lessons, or maybe I'm not right. I don't know if you know about that. And through these life lessons, they're going to keep repeating, whether it be a health issue, financial issue, relationship. They're going to keep repeating until we learn them, eventually, hopefully. And if not, then maybe the next life if you believe in reincarnation. But maybe you can speak a little bit about that. Like, what does the tradition of the philosophy of life say about repeating patterns and being able to digest them and turn them into that wisdom that so many of us are seeking? How can we choose and evolve from our suffering instead of get stuck in the suffering?
Yes, most certainly. That's a core teaching from the Four Desires, as you mentioned, and what our teacher Yoga Rupa Rod Stryker does say quite often is, "What lesson are we tired of learning?"
Mm,
And that's a pivotal exercise in the Four Desires work, which is just so powerful.
yeah.
Lately, for me, it's been the lesson of procrastination and not getting things done that
Mm,
I know will benefit not only myself but those around me as well. And
yeah.
why am I not willing to put the rubber to the road and actually make the things happen that need to happen, instead of just delaying and just making excuses and things like that? But
Mm,
so you were asking, you asked me to speak about how that plays into energy patterns, and
yeah.
well, you
Can I ask
you
you
also.
quickly
Oh,
to
please,
say,
please.
okay, you say that because that procrastination, I think a lot of people have that. Do you know why? Maybe the deeper layer behind it is like you're scared of like your success, or you're scared of having to up level, or what's the piece, do you think? If,
Oh, right. Oh, for sure. It's one of my vikalpas for sure.
mm,
It's being it's being scared that I'm not enough and not getting enough done and not producing, not showing the world that I'm enough. It's quite common, but I didn't think it was ugly when I discovered it. I mean, a lot of us who discover our vikalpas don't want to believe it. And I thought, me not wanting to be, that's not me. No way. But I had to say, wait a minute. Oh my God, it's me. I'm worried about not being enough. And so
mm,
what do? I pack my schedule with way too much. I put too much on my agenda. I try to accomplish, and then I get overwhelmed, and then I'm late, and then I just kind of shut down and then don't do anything. And that results in procrastination. And then so I'm not only not getting what's on my
mm.
agenda, but I'm late for everything. And then I just want to just be lazy. It's a downward, it's a vicious cycle.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you for sharing that. I relate so much to that. Like one of my Vikalpanas, for any of these are like, what the hell is a Vikalpana? It's basically separating us. It's separating us from what we truly desire in
Yes.
life. And I think so many of us can relate. It's like the self-fulfilling prophecy is like one of mine. One was like, I want to avoid being alone. So I like overcompensate by being really needy and attached to my relationship. So it's like almost like pushing them away because I'm so intense and so attached to that relationship. And then ultimately I end up being dumped or not, the relationship ends, and I'm like, oh, see, I told you so, I'm alone. It's like that self-fulfilling prophecy that it's like the ego wants to be like, see, you were right. Like, yeah, I was right.
Well, the interesting thing about that is that we are powerful enough to make that happen, and we can shift and work towards our sankalpa instead of our vikalpa,
Yeah.
and move towards the goal of our soul instead of V, which is taking us away from our soul's purpose. So that prefix V is separating, and sankalpa would be taking us towards, right? But it's interesting. We are powerful beyond measure, and when we're on autopilot, we don't always put our energy and effort in towards what our soul really wants to achieve our dharma. Excuse me. Yeah.
Love that.
Um,
Yeah, share what you were saying before I interrupted you. I know
that's okay.
you're on a kind of little mission there, and I butted it.
Thank you. No, I love it. When you have a spark, please like share. The idea of learning lessons that we don't want to learn anymore, or we lessons that we aren't learning and keep showing up. It so my opinion on that is it has everything to do with karma. It has everything to do with what we've done in the past that needs to be resolved. And why is it not resolved? Well, it's not resolved because it's simply that we're not willing to take responsibility and practice those three nons. We have to accept. We can't fight. We can't fight what is. Don't judge it. So one of the biggest challenges that we have in life is trying to figure out reasons and causes and for the situation that we find ourselves in.
Yeah.
You know what? My brain wants to know, but does it actually matter? What matters is we're here. The situation is here. I'm here. What am I going to do with it? Am I going to get mad and fight and resist? Because what you resist will tend to persist. Yeah. And what you fight, you strengthen, and what you resist persists. Or do we practice acceptance first and say, okay, here I am. How do I move through this as mindfully as possible? And that, I believe, is how you eliminate karma. And that's how you learn lessons. You say, okay, here we are. Let's understand this as best we can. Try to see all angles, no ego involved. Let's just look at it. And then how do we solve this? What's the best way to move through this? And I believe that once we do that, we'll stop learning these lessons that we're tired of frickin' learning.
Amen. I would love to ask you, Paul, that kind of spurred on my next question, which is why I love podcasts, because it really allows me to tune into the present moment. And that's something that I've really struggled with my whole life, like is being present, and a lot of like dissociation and not really being here in this moment, always thinking about the future or the past, and caught up in my mind. So I really think that this podcast can really create that present moment. And I think when you're connected to that moment, it's so magical. But I would love to share with you, and maybe you could share your personal opinion or also the traditional um, perspective of how do we, not get rid of the ego, but how do we dissolve the parts of our ego that are not serving us in our evolution? Because I know, traditional yoga is very powerful, and obviously we're part of the the Srividi lineage is something that we're really passionate about sharing. And I would love for everyone to have something, whether it be that lineage or a different, perspective that kind of helps them move beyond these limitations, which really is just like this, quality of our ego that sometimes can keep us stuck. So how does the traditional teachings help us evolve from these like limitations, these karma, samskaras, that kind of stuff?
Let's first identify what we mean by ego. Some people might have different ideas of what that means.
Yeah.
So to me, and I think you might share this definition, it's the part of us that experiences wild emotional swings, experiences the needs and wants, and the part of us that compares and contrasts, and the part of us that has labels, and the part of us that's transitory. Frankly, it's the part that's not our soul, it's not our true self, it's the part of us that's maya or illusion, the part
Mm.
of us that thinks, you know reality is this is all there is, this is me, and if I don't have this title of president or CEO, or if I don't have this particular spouse, then I'm not as good as someone else, or I'm less than these. So that's how I would define ego. So that's I'll speak from that perspective. If you have something else to change or add to that, tell me, or else I'll just use that as a rough
Yeah, that's
working.
great definition.
Yep. Okay.
Your
Okay.
definition is good enough. You
Yeah.
are enough.
Yes. Okay. It has everything to do with what I've already alluded to, with those non-reaction, non-judgment, and non-attachment. And it's understanding that we are part of this world, we are part of something greater, and all life forms are connected. And if we don't all succeed together, no one succeeds. Now, of course, certain lifetimes we can be bad boys and bad girls, and do bad, things that harm others, harm ourselves, and harm others. But until we realize that we're one human unit, and really it's more than just humans, it's all of life, it's animals, it's plants, it's everything, we start to approach life differently, and our ego starts to naturally diminish, because the ego, I didn't use the word individualization before, but the ego is, by almost by definition, according to Eckhart Tolle, individualization. It's the sense of I-ness. It's me. It's what makes me me. No one else is me. No one else can possibly be me. But when we lose that, we realize that, I'm just one
Mm.
tiny, tiny, tiny expression of this grand energy field in the entire cosmos. And the cosmos that is evolving on its own, call it God, call it being, is going through its own evolution.
Mm.
And how does it do that? It does that by manifesting in trillions and trillions of different ways. I'm one of those trillions of ways. You're one of those ways. My ficus plant in the other room, this mother of tongue plant, is a different way that the universe is manifesting itself.
Yeah.
And until we start to work together and understand we're all connected, we're going to have hardships in life. The ego is the deterrent to that. The ego is the force that separates everyone and everything.
Yeah.
So eliminating the ego is the connect, is by it will be connected, and suffering reduces when we stop being, stated another way, when we stop being so damn selfish. We'll stop suffering as much.
Yeah.
So
And special. I don't know about you, but I growing up, I had a beautiful teacher on Kabbalah last week, and he was sharing about like he had this attachment to being more special than other people, and I've had that most of my life. Like I thought I was not better, but I feel like I could get away with more because I was a girl and pretty, and kind of a bit cheeky in that sense, and it definitely served me up until like adulthood. And then I realized like I can't get away with this anymore, like I'm actually not special, I'm just the same as everyone else. So the ego can be really like tricky. It thinks like it makes you feel like you're special because of your circumstances, or because of your background, your religion, or your status. Do you ever get that, or have you experienced that in your life where you felt like that superiority, like I'm more special, or is it just me?
that that's a real pointed question right there. I'm glad you asked it, though. Well, I do have an ego, and it does rear its ugly head sometimes. My girlfriend Amelia would say that it rears its head more than I would say it rears its head. She calls me out on it.
Good.
I mean, when I was a kid, when I was in junior high, I literally would tell people, I want to have the best job in the world. I want to be president. I think I may have mentioned, I want to be president of the world. Not only president of the United States, but I want to, what is the most powerful thing I can be in life? That's president of the world. So if that's not ego, I don't know what is. Now, of course, I dropped that idea when I learned about politics and how nasty politics appears to be sometimes.
Mm.
So I want nothing to do with politics anymore. But um, yes, at times I do believe I have gifts that others might not have, and I try to share them in a way that will help others. And instead of making myself look better, and
Yeah.
I do ego checks sometimes, every time I post something on social media,
Yeah.
I, I go through a series of questions to myself. And the main question is, what's my motive for posting this?
Mm.
And no one can judge those things but us. You have to judge for yourself if you're operating through ego or operating through your higher self. And so, as honest as I think I am, yes, of course, ego does come out sometimes. Why do I do so many arm balances? Why is it necessary? Does it bring me closer towards enlightenment? I'm sure it does not.
Your muscles are
But I
good
still do them.
though. I like the picture. That's why my ego, like your other photo more, the one like with the black and white one. I think that's a really cool photo. Not that your other photo isn't cool, but that photo is really cool. You guys will see it, the cool photo that I'm talking about.
It is very artistic. I like it. It has the malas around the wrist, and I have a big smile.
I just
Yeah,
like
it's
muscles.
yeah. You're so materialistic. No, the way the photographer did that, they do pop for sure.
The girls are gonna love it. I mean, most of the listeners are girls. They love it. I remember like a couple of weeks ago, I asked someone, the guy I had on the podcast, he was quite cute. My boyfriend pulled me out on it, and he was like, "You were only interviewing because he's cute." And I'm like, "No, I really like him. He's got a beautiful energy. He is very cute." But I asked him at the end, like, "What's your star sign?" Just out of curiosity.
Don't let your boyfriend hear that. Just kidding. Just
No,
kidding.
no. I told him, he was laughing too. We're quite open about that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's funny. Like I think it's a great shout out to the ego, and not that it's a bad thing. We all have it. It's just how we can observe it and become, like Eckhart Tolle says, the witness of it. And it will happen at times when we're not able to have that reflective space. But I think for me, the more I practice on my own kind of journey in my path, the more reflective I can become of it, and the more aware in the moment. So that moment of reactivity is a little bit less. It's a little bit less, confronting, and I think it just becomes a little bit more. Yeah, you start to, like, even this morning, my partner said I said something, and it kind of triggered my ego a little bit, and he was like, "Is your ego triggered?" And I was like. And then I realized, yeah, it is a little bit. So in that moment of reactivity, you can actually soften and be like, oh, it's just my ego, it's fine. It's
I
not me.
love how you said be able to watch it,
Mm.
observe it, and that is a teaching from Eckhart Tolle. But as soon as we become aware, it diminishes its power, and we are able to is control the right word, or work around it, not allow it to color our actions as much. Another key element to working to reduce the ego's power in our life is noticing our emotions. And
Mm.
the word emotions and the whole concept of human emotions is a very mixed bag, and it's very tricky to have a discussion on that sometimes. But when we notice that we have wild emotional swings frequently, if that's in our nature, that's that's an expression of the ego.
Mm.
So if we can narrow the emotional swings a little bit, narrow them from, instead of being the frequency is huge, from very excited high frequency emotions to very very disappointed low frequency
Yeah.
emotion. You narrow that a little bit. Of course, we're going to have emotions as humans, but how wide are the swings and how frequent are they?
Yeah. And do you believe, like, for me, it's like the more that we can tap into that, and more that we can, balance out these highs and the lows, and we can come back to that place of stira sukha, like steadiness and ease, and like kind of that, not being too high when the high, when it's, like that job, for example, you're going to get, I don't know if you had that really high, like rush of like, oh, I'm going to make this much money. And then suffering, because then the low was like that crash, like, oh, I'm not experiencing that abundance in that way right now. But do you feel like your highs and lows have become more steady, or do you still kind of get caught up in that, that little bit of fluctuation?
Oh, if I hadn't have found yoga, I would be a very, very different person for sure. No, I think I keep them in check for the most part, and I wouldn't be able to teach the stuff if I didn't practice it to a certain extent for sure. I
Mm,
am on a journey, I'm on a path just like everyone else is, and I think my one of my biggest gifts is that I can recognize it quickly. I am by no means, you know, perfectly balanced, counterbalanced, but I do recognize it. I don't have a huge temper, thank goodness. So yes, I do
mm.
think I keep it in check. Do you remember? Did you ever see those bumper stickers? WWJD. What would Jesus do?
No, I never.
Okay, well, for a while there,
Very
it might have been in the
American.
'90s. Yeah, it's probably very American, but there were these bumper stickers that a lot of Christians would put on their cars. What would Jesus do? But that can be applied to any spiritual, any enlightened person that you look up to. How would Patanjali or what? How would Rod Stryker act? Or how would Tanya? I mean, how would anyone anyone that you look up to? What would Patanjali do? What would the Buddha do in any given situation? Would he have an emotional reaction and flip off the driver who cut him off in traffic, or would he maybe send a namaste and a blessing and just take a breath? And what would the Buddha do in any given? So I'm saying that because I actually ask myself that.
Yeah.
What would my higher self do in this situation? Not my ego. How would my higher self act? How would someone like Jesus or the Buddha or Patanjali or Mother Teresa or the Dalai Lama act in
Mm.
any given challenging situation? Well, let me try to act like that. Let me use that as a model.
That's a great, yeah, I think that's a great idea actually. I haven't thought of it like that. And in terms of like, I know you wanted to share maybe a yoga sutra. Is there one that you want to dissect with the people listening? Maybe one that you can share and kind of translate the meaning of if you feel called to.
I would love to. I want to keep it very, very simple, and
Okay.
let's just go with Sutra 2, the second one in the whole teaching.
Mm.
Um, a lot of your listeners will probably be familiar. Some might not, though. Let me. So I have several books on the Yoga Sutras, but so the very first sutra says, "And now a teaching of yoga is to commence." So it's just like an introduction saying you've done some preparation work, and now let's study the real stuff, right?
Meditation.
And then
Now I begin.
contrary to popular belief, the sutras, yeah, that it's not learning how to do handstands or warrior threes or standing splits, for example. It's how do you calm the mind. So Sutra 2. And so the second sutra in the first chapter in Sanskrit, it's kind of fun to say. Maybe we should quiz some of your listeners. It's
Yes.
Yogash Chitta Vritti Nirodha.
Yeah.
Yogash Chitta Vritti Nirodha.
Yoga
And simply
Shakti Narodaha. Mm. I've heard that
and
one a few times.
simply put, that's the definition of yoga from Patanjali, right? And what does he say yoga is? Yoga is the calming of the mind. So if you try to define yoga, that's how he defines it. Yoga is the calming of the mind, stopping the movement, the vrittis, the movement of the mind. So why when we think of yoga do we think of downward dogs and warrior poses? When he says right here, yoga is the calming of the mind. Well, it's funny how it happened. How did yoga evolve in the modern world? Well, yoga evolved into an asana practice, a physical practice, but that's only one small tool in the full tool belt of yoga practice in a holistic sense. But yoga in a holistic sense is the calming of the mind. So how do we do that? Well, Patanjali gives us 196 sutras on how to do that, and a grand total of 4 of the sutras are about physical poses.
Mm.
The first of the 4 just introduces asana in the scheme of 8 of the 8 limbs, and then there are 3 that talk about poses. The other 193 or 192 are about calming the mind. So that's why I love Sutra 1.2 so much. So chitta would be mind, vritti would be movement, so the movement of the mind, and then nirodha means the cessation or the suspension or the stopping. So
Mm.
yoga is the stopping of the movement of the mind. And how do we do that? Well, we learn to meditate. We learn to calm the ego so we don't have wild emotional flare-ups. We learn to develop ekagrata, which is a one-pointed focus of the mind. And you can focus on something as simple as the Tibetan singing bowl, You can focus on a light in the heart, which is a very popular technique in the Sri Vidya tradition. Focusing on a loved one, a mantra, a prayer, a candle. There's so many different methodologies to get the mind calm, but that's what yoga is. And I think that's so powerful to remember. Be achieving a state of samadhi, or higher samadhi, if you will, which is transcendence, um, calming the mind. That's how we do it. We have to learn to calm the mind. Yeah, calming the mind.
Calm the ego.
Calm the ego. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So we
Yeah.
can, clear seeing viveka, so we can see the obstacles in our way that stop us from shining a light and really pursuing that path of dharma, which is in alignment with all those four pieces of the desires. Maybe you can share after a little bit about, Atha, Moshka, Kama, and Dharma, just to break them down and how they play in our life, and like at what point we need to focus on maybe a specific desire and area.
Love to. Yeah, let's talk about our teacher Rod Stryker's book for a moment.
Oh, I love it. My dog ate my book from Rod's.
Yeah.
Don't tell him that. I probably will tell him eventually when he comes on the Dharma journey. I'll share with him that my dog ate. It's like such a typical cliche, like my dog ate my homework.
And you have literal proof. My dog actually chewed on this book. So I would love to just promote this in every way, shape, and form that I can. This has been a huge part of my journey as well.
Mm.
Um, so the Four Desires is a book that Rod Stryker has written, and it started off as one of his training modules. So I think he has 12 or 13, maybe even 14 different training modules now, and they used to all be 5 days each. The Four Desires training, which is where you were mentioning at the beginning, where you and I met at
Yeah.
one of the Four Desires trainings, it's now typically taught as a 3-day course, but this book came out of the teaching of that course, so the Four Desires. And so these are teachings that come from the ancient the Upanishads, which are part of the Vedas, the ancient body of Indian scriptures. And the Four Desires in Sanskrit, they're referred to as purusharta, the desires of the soul, or the needs of the soul. So or the will of the soul. There are different ways to translate that. Everything in manifestation has a movement or a will or a desire, or else there would be no manifestation. God, if you will, I'm using that word, but you can swap the word God out for universe, nature, being, anything. That we wouldn't have a manifested universe if there wasn't a will, if there wasn't a desire to expand and grow and experience and evolve. There would be no physical world. There would be just potential. So there has to be a desire from the divine mind in the first place to even have the outbreath of Brahma, as some traditions speak, to create a universe, a big bang, if you will. Everything that exists in the physical world needs a desire or a will to live. And the ancient Vedic teachings tell us that human beings generally have 4 main categories of will or desire. And when they're fulfilled, our life is lived to the fullest.
Yeah.
We have a completely lived, fully experienced life in this incarnation. And the 4 desires are, as you already mentioned. So we have artha, dharma, moksha, and kama. So artha, A-R-T-H-A, refers to physical needs, things that we need in order for our own safety, security, shelter, transportation, clothing, food. It's almost like the foundational piece there.
Mm.
And then dharma, and dharma is a big one. We can talk for a long time about what dharma means. We can try to encapsulate it. It's our soul's main purpose for this incarnation. What is the main achievement goal for this body with these capacities in this particular lifetime? How do we do that in this lifetime? And then I mentioned moksha. Moksha relates to spiritual freedom, and kama, K-A-M-A, relates to pleasure, which can be achieved through friendships, romantic pleasure, beauty, art, music. So those are roughly the 4 desires. And throughout our life, they change, the dominance of one and or the other
Yeah.
changes, and we become somewhat deficient in one or more at any given time. And the book and the course teach us how to recognize which one it needs the most work and how to correct it.
Yeah.
It's a brilliant teaching.
Life
Yeah,
changing. It's super life.
exactly.
And what desire are you kind of focusing on in this moment in time?
It's artha.
Mm,
Artha, because I'm in a transitory period. My career has been real estate for 17 years, and it's my dharma is evident. Dharma, I know I'm very fortunate to know it, and it's to be a yoga and meditation teacher. It is. I just am not satisfying artha through yoga and meditation right
yeah.
now. I'm
Yeah.
set. So artha is deficient because I'm deriving my security through real estate, which has been a beautiful part of my life journey. But I know it's not my dharma in this life.
Yeah.
It's a stepping stone. It's part of it.
It's beautiful though, because you, like you said before, you wouldn't have found potentially your dharma at that stage if you hadn't have done your pre-dharma work with I think that's such a magical thing. It's like people think, oh, I do a yoga teacher training, what's my dharma, maybe I'm a yoga teacher. And it doesn't necessarily mean you have to share the teachings. You can share the teachings in your own way, in a leadership role. Like a lot of my clients are in corporate jobs, and it's like, how can you bring that essence of your true nature through your own element of expression? It doesn't have to be related to this, but I think for you that's interesting you say that. Mine definitely is Arthur and Dharma. I think they're kind of together at the moment, but it's definitely like, I think at different stages of our life we're drawn towards one or the other. And is it normally like, would you say later on in your life is more the time for moshka, or what would you say, like in correlation to where they start and end, or do they always fluctuate depending on where you're at?
That is interesting. I actually have not been asked that before. Let's think about that. In the earlier parts of our lives, we're kind of by nature more materialistic because we're going to school. We're learning, skills and trades in order to do work and find our career path so we can make money and support a family. So you're probably right about that. Moksha may show up later in life.
Yeah.
However, a younger person might, read the book or go to the Four Desires course and realize, wow, moksha is lacking in my life. I mean, I'm sure that does happen.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I've heard, like, in my understanding, it's like we first focus on Arthur and then we focus on more Dharma. So we kind of like the age between like 0 to 27. It's like we're figuring out like where is my place in the world. And then when we get to like maybe 27 and 30, we kind of have a bit more of that sense of security within, hopefully. And then we're guided through like more to the piece of like, Arthur Dharma, like in they're kind of fluctuating. And then from that place, then we can start to enjoy the fruits of our labor when we get into maybe our 40s and 50s with the karma piece. And then later on in life, if you either renunciate or you just enjoy like retirement and you have that freedom piece. But I've seen in different areas, like people, it's not always like that linear. It can change, I think. Yeah, it was interesting. I didn't know if you had more on that, but
No, I like the way you correlate that to the different phases. And I know in certain cultures, there are four specific phases of life. And as you said, the renunciate phase is the end. And there's also another phase. It's when the physical body dies, and that's the period of rest. It would be the winter in preparation for another spring where you're born into the next body. But that's really nice. I actually have not made that correlation, but it does make sense. It does. I would also think that some people wouldn't have it show up that linearly.
yeah.
I think the teaching that Rod Stryker gives us is so brilliant that we can identify which area is deficient, regardless of, or which area needs attention. Let's say it that way. No
Yeah.
matter what phase of our life we're in, I think in this modern world, the lines are blurred and the traditions are, melding and changing and stuff. So.
Yeah, and I think, like you said before, like the sankalpa piece, which is like our intention or our goal, or the thing that we desire. What would you say your desire right now is to transition into your full expression, which is being a meditation yoga teacher and having the means to pursue that. Would that be your main goal or desire right now?
Yes, that is my immediate intention, and I am so happy to say that one of my previous sankalpa is becoming realized very soon. And I think you know what I'm going to say. It's the yoga retreat that Tanya Boyganzan and I are leading May 1st in 1 month from now. That has been a sankalpa which is coming true finally. It was scheduled for last April, but we all know what happened in March of last year,
Oh,
where the world
yeah.
shut down. So we had to postpone it twice, and it's actually happening now. But leading a retreat is something very, very monumental for me, because it's going to allow me to reach people in a way that can help me give more, give more than just a regular yoga class or a teacher training or a weekend workshop. It'll allow me to give more, and it'll allow me to, potentially do more of these. Everyone has a first time. It's the first time I'm leading a retreat. And so I'll be able to do more, and then, transition more into, giving what I can, and maybe replacing some of the income that I had from real estate from before.
Yeah, definitely. I hope to get you out to Bali and we can run a retreat, and Tanya too, because she's amazing.
Let's do it. I am all about it. Let's go.
Fingers crossed. Maybe you can share just like about the vision, or like the clear seeing retreat, because I would love to, if anyone listening that can get away or is desperate to get away, would love to, it resonates with you and wants to know more about it. Maybe you
Sure.
can share a little bit about your offering, because I know I
Yes.
want to go, but that's one of my side helpers. Oh.
Thank you. Yes, Tanya and I are calling it the Clear Vision Retreat, and we both believe so wholeheartedly that Viveka Shakti is so important in our spiritual path. Viveka Shakti being the power to see the world clearly without the coloring of our emotions and our ego. Seeing things as they are. What does that do for us? When we can see things as they are, our path, our dharma becomes clear. We're no longer in a jungle, so to speak, with vines and twigs and leaves and mist and fog clouding our vision. We
And
can
tigers.
rise. And yes, I know, right? Sweat, tears, and blood, and yeah, and tigers and all the lions and bears. We can, metaphorically rise above the trees and of the jungle and see the scene from above. And that's what we do when we view the world through our higher vision. Our clarity of sight comes from our higher self, not from our brain, not from our physical eyes. It comes from our intuition, our buddhi, our buddhi manas, our intuition mind. And we can't even access that part of us, that power, until we do what? Until we, Sutra 1.2, calm the brain, until we calm the fluctuations of the mind. How can our consciousness possibly go into our state of buddhic awareness, our intuition, if we're constantly squirrel, shiny thing, ooh, new iPhone, ooh, Louboutins, oh, new Range Rover, oh, all these things. If we're constantly being pulled and
Yeah.
comparing and contrasting and wanting, we can't calm our brain and see clearly. We're going to constantly be sucked into the physical world, into the material world, where things are illusory. Frankly speaking, they're illusory. So
Yeah.
I went down a rabbit.
No, I
I
love
did
it.
what I said.
But what exactly are you like? What's the kind of the syllabus of the training? Like
Sure. That's
what do you
where I
learn?
was going, but I
More
got
for
off
me than
track.
anyone else, but I'm gonna be on a flight.
So everything we're doing at the retreat will be geared towards that, towards learning to calm the mind and see clearly, and understanding when the ego shows up and when the ego clouds our judgment. So how does that show up in a retreat? Well, we're going to have 1 or 2 yoga classes, asana classes a day. And as you know, Briar, our asana classes are not just physical poses. They're pranayama, a lot of meditation, breathing, um, learning how to rein in our energy and then control and direct our energy for specific purposes. We'll be doing some specific practices to clear emotional needs and desires, and to set intentions. There will be a lot of this going on
Mm,
in the retreat. Not a formal 4 desires workshop, but a lot of the elements will be in play there.
yeah.
There'll be a lot of yoga nidra. I love the way Rod Stryker talks about how yoga nidra it aims to defragment the mind, how to bring our consciousness into a point of this laser focus. In our normal waking state, we're very fragmented, and the advertising industry certainly doesn't help with that. it gives us so many images and sounds and fancy cool things to look at and think about, that fragments us. It dilutes, and it dilutes our focus, and it deludes us, frankly. So defragmenting will be a huge part of our retreat. Calming ourselves through yoga nidra, getting out of the busyness of our regular lives and putting us into this gorgeous, beautiful, natural environment will help with that defragmentation. All these things have the intention of allowing us to see clearly. So we're going to walk away from the retreat with sankalpa, with a path to move forward, to make 2021 very, very special, very effective. That's our goal. That's why we call it Clear Vision Retreat. We want to be clear for the rest of our year and our life.
Yeah, it sounds absolutely amazing, and I've just started working. I got my kitas in Bali. It's like a permanent work visa to work at a healing center, and that's like the only thing that's holding me, because otherwise I'd actually be on a plane right now, because I would absolutely love to come, and I know I will, but I maybe not this time, but in the next one. But I'm sure that you're going to be doing more of these, but Costa
Oh,
Rica sounds incredible. I would love
we will do more, and it would be such a pleasure to have you, Briar. You and your partner should come. And but yes, a little bit about Costa Rica is a very accessible place from the US, and we wanted it to be a plane flight that wasn't more than a few hours from, excuse me, most states in the country. And Tanya's coming from the Minneapolis area, and I'm coming from the Las Vegas area. My students are coming from around here typically, for the most part. Blue Spirit Resort is one of the most amazing places she and I have been. I have not been to the practice, and I haven't been to Bali, so I don't know how amazing it is there, but I'm sure it's awesome.
yeah.
We love Blue Spirit. We've been there each several times. So we thought that provided such a great environment just for a retreat like this. And
Mm.
it's a 5-minute walk to the beach. A lot of retreat centers that we considered weren't on the beach. We thought that was a huge factor. We wanted to be able to walk from our rooms to the beach, and that was huge. And the food and
And
the
do you have any
monkeys.
spots left, or are they all snapped up?
We actually sold all the rooms that they had initially allotted to us, but they gave us more because we needed more. So there
Amazing.
are a few more. There are like
Yeah.
four more rooms, I believe.
Well, I'm going to put the link at the bottom, and if anyone feels the call, then they can go find you or Tanya and jump right in. Um,
Thank you.
no, my pleasure. And is there anything? I know you did a series of incredible meditations on your Instagram, which I'll definitely link your IG to. But is there anything else, like offerings or anything you would like to share, like your book, that people want to reach out and connect with you, they can, because I would love to promote you.
Sure. I would love to talk about that a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for mentioning the meditations on Instagram. So when lockdown happened last year, I started doing morning meditations for everyone on Instagram Live, just because the world was crazy and we needed a sense of calmness. So every day, once our governor here in Nevada told businesses to shut down, I started that morning at 7 a.m. and I did a meditation every single day for 100 days, every single day in the morning around 7-ish. And they're all on my Instagram. So they're all there. We might have repeated a few techniques a few times, but for the most part, they're varied, they're different. Most of them I've learned, through my studies with Rod and with Tanya, and
Mm.
my experiences with the Theosophical Society and Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. So yeah, please go on, meditate. They're all there. They're all free. They're all there. The other offering that you just mentioned, Briar, is the book. So
Yeah.
in 2012, my co-author and co-teacher Terry Hunt and I self-published a book called Ancient Wisdom for a New Age, a
Ooh.
practical guide for spiritual growth. And Briar, I had every intention to get this in the mail to you, and I had trouble doing it because it's challenging to ship things to Bali, but I still have every intention to get this in the mail, and it's gonna come to you.
Yeah, I will
So
read it.
this book is in paperback and hardback, in English and Spanish. We had a wonderful friend translate it to Spanish for us. It's also on all three digital formats. So the iBook, the ebook, Kindle, Nook. It's on all the different digital formats.
Wow.
And during lockdown, I had intended to finish the audio book version, but I didn't, and because it wasn't a sankalpa, I should make it a sankalpa and actually commit to
Your
it.
voice is such a storytelling voice. Like even listening now,
Thank
oh
you.
my God, this episode is going to be so good, because your voice is very clear and crisp. Maybe it's your really good microphone too,
It's all the microphone. Thank
but
you for saying that. But I'm very excited to finish the audio. I started it, and pretty soon there will be an audio book of it as well. But it's going to be like a 7 hour audio book because it's 400 pages.
wow.
It's not the font is small though, guys, so it's very accessible. I mean, large. The font is large, and there's lots of space in between the lines, and the margins are big, so it's
I'm gonna
not
say that's
daunting.
promoting your retreat because people need to see clearly to read the book.
That's so funny. And this book is what I was mentioning at the beginning of our conversation today. It's Terry's and my synthesis of the various avenues of spiritual growth that we've experienced. So we have a lot of the Yoga Sutras, a lot of Eckhart Tolle, a lot of theosophy, um, combined, of course, with our own life experience into a manual for spiritual development for human beings on earth in this time, in this modern era.
Wow.
And we think it's easily understandable for most people, and that was our goal with that.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing. And last question, I think, unless you have anything else to add, what would you say the importance is in your life of having a teacher or a guide to kind of show you the way? Like how has that helped you evolve? And because some people think I guess they don't need a teacher, and it's like the student, the teacher appears and the student's ready, all of that kind of stuff. How would you say like your different teachers in your life have made an impact on you?
I've mentioned this quite a few times during our conversation that having a solid base of teachings and a solid understanding is so important. We're all completely individualized in this life. However, we're also connected. How do we make these teachings and this practice our own? I believe every human being is a student and every human being is also a teacher. We're all students and we're all teachers. I think that we all have the duty to synthesize our own teachings in our own way and share them back with something new, a little bit something from our own experience. That doesn't mean changing the original teaching. It doesn't mean that. It means preserving the teaching and perhaps speaking it in your own voice,
Yeah.
from your own experience. But having a teacher is important because we need a foundation. We don't want to recreate the wheel. We don't need to relearn what's been learned for millennia.
Mm,
Trust the darn process that's already in place. And I'm so grateful to have Tanya and to have Rod Stryker and to have Terry and to have the Theosophical Society.
mm,
Rod will say this in all of his trainings, that a living teacher with a living lineage is so important. The practices that are transmitted,
yeah.
the process of guru parampara, the transmission of the lineage, is so powerful. And the teachings are actually alive. They've been vivified with so much Shakti and so much power that they are living things. Mantra are alive.
Mm,
They're not idle words that we're just chanting. They're
yeah.
living things that we're utilizing to shape our energy and our consciousness.
Yeah.
So that's what a teacher does for us, and they transmit something that's alive.
Mm.
And then we, as the disciple, become the guru, and then we teach. And that's a beautiful process.
Yeah.
It's so important.
Yeah, I love that because I see the humility in sharing the teachings in our own way, but we're always honoring the message, like the people that have shared it with us. And sometimes I've noticed my own ego get involved, like growing, as I evolve and, the teachings and learning all of this cool stuff, you kind of want to share it. And sometimes like that comes from, time and embodiment and really Tanya always says to me, like, you'll eventually, at some point you'll get your humble pie and you'll have to eat it. And then that will just make you a better teacher because you can come from that place of deep inner knowing and humility and respect and reverence to these incredible teachings. And we have to honor them and share them in our most authentic way. So thank
Humble
you,
pie.
Paul. Is there anything else you want to share with us, or is there maybe like a mantra that you feel inspired to share, like an open one, or a saying or a teaching or something that you feel like would be nice to close the podcast today?
Sure, sure, sure.
Put you on the spot a little bit.
No, I would love to. Let me pull up the mantra that I would like to share. And it's actually a prayer. take a look here. This is the chat with you, and I mean, I could keep talking and for hours and hours. This is so fun to chat with you
I know,
about
I
so
love
many
it.
things.
I have the best job. It's so good.
You have a very cool job. So what a prayer, I call it a mantra that resonates so much with me is the prayer of Saint Francis, Francis of Assisi. And I've actually taken the liberty to change a couple of the words to make it resonate a little bit better, but with myself. So let's go ahead and just close our eyes for a moment, and I'll speak the prayer, but let's take a couple of breaths and just center ourselves here. And so let's just sit tall, let the eyes close, and we'll take a couple of breaths here. And let's just remember that we are an integral part of this world. As small physically as we think we are, we're one body, we're one person. It's not that way at all on the inner planes. We are an integral, a monumental part of this universe. And if we don't play our part to the best of our ability, we're doing a disservice to all of life. The world needs us. And this mantra helps us remember that. So here we go. The prayer of Saint Francis, spoken from Paul. I am an instrument of peace. Where there is hatred, I sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. Where there is sadness, joy. Rather than seeking to be consoled, I console others. Rather than seeking to be understood, I understand. Rather than seeking to be loved, I give love. For it is in giving that we receive. It is in pardoning that we are pardoned. And it is in releasing attachments that we are born again to eternal life. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti.
Oh, I felt that vibration all through me. Thank you so much, Paul. I hope you guys have got some juicy bits out of this, and I'll put all of Paul's details in the show notes, and you can connect with Paul and hopefully jump on one of his incredible retreats or purchase his incredible book that I can't wait to read and dive into. So thank you so much for your time and your wisdom, and yeah, so much love to you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode. We hope you enjoyed it. If you want to connect with us, my Instagram is @BriarRoots, @TheDharmaJourney. Please feel free to send us your favorite episode, and we'd love to hear your feedback. If you want to reach and connect with me further, I offer weekly women's circles every Sunday. Also, Ayurvedic healing programs, consultations. So all of my details are at the bottom. Thank you so much for listening. This is really a part of the Dharma Journey movement to bring us closer together, connection, community, collaboration, and really inspire one another on our path towards liberation. Thank you so much for listening. Have an incredible day. I hope.